suck, squeeze, bang, and blow. These are the four strokes of the car engines. And with that, welcome to a new episode of Car Basics 101. And in today's episode, I'll explain the car engine to new car enthusiasts. Before starting on how the engine works, let's have a look at when and how it got created. The first so-called four-stroke engine was invented by Nicolas Auguste Otto in 1876. Thus, the engine is called an Otto engine. The Otto engine is the base of almost all petrol cars on the road of today. Diesel engines otherwise were first produced in 1879, so around 20 years later, but invented in 1893 by a guy called Rudolf Diesel. Petrol and diesel have one key difference, and it is in the ignition. Diesel uses compression and its heat to ignite the fuel. Petrol otherwise makes use of spark plugs which manually ignite the fuel. And this only works because diesel has a higher ignition temperature. Diesel ignites at a temperature of around 1500 to 2500 degrees Celsius, while petrol burns at around 400 degrees Celsius. And with that out of the way, let's make first clear that you know all the essential engine parts. The engine is made of some main pieces, which are the engine block, the cylinder head, and the oil pan, with on the side a timing chain or belt and the serpentine belt. In the so-called cylinder head is all the valve train components, being camshaft linked with timing chain or belt, valve springs, and the valves themselves. The spark plugs or injectors in diesels, as well as petrol cars, are also located at the top as well. In the engine block is basically only the piston. The piston has a piston ring around it, which seals the combustion chamber. The piston is connected to the connecting rod via a pin. Connecting rod is connected to the crankshaft, and the only main purpose of the connecting rod is just connecting the piston with the crankshaft, which lies between the oil pan and the engine block. Oil pan's only reason is really to keep oil, nothing more. The serpentine belt drives your AC, power steering, oil pump, brake booster, and alternator. The timing chain is connected with the crankshaft and rotates the camshaft in the right timing in order to make the valves work properly. And now let's get into how the car engine really works. The car engine has four strokes, as I mentioned in the beginning: intake, compression, combustion, and exhaust. Both diesel and petrol have these four strokes, or how I like to call them, suck, squeeze, bang, and blow. In the intake stroke, the intake valve gets opened by the camshaft and lets air-fuel mixture in. But in the diesel, the difference is that it's only air that gets in. In the compression stroke, both valves are closed. The cylinder compresses the air-fuel mixture or only air in diesel. While in the combustion stroke, the spark plug in so-called petrol engines creates spark to ignite the air-fuel mixture, and in diesel an injector injects diesel into the really hot air in the combustion chamber, which ignites the diesel instantly because of the hot air. And in the exhaust gas, the exhaust valve opens, cylinder pushes all gases out. And where the power is all transferred is just the combustion stroke. And to not have a really unstable power output, we make use of a flywheel. In the combustion stroke, we send power to the flywheel, which spins at the entire time the engine is on, basically. And this is how we get a smooth power output. And the power is transferred from the cylinder being pushed down and rotating the so-called crankshaft. The crankshaft being rotated also rotates the flywheel, which is connected via a clutch or a torque converter onto the transmission. And if you want to know more about transmission, check out my video on that. And from the transmission through a drive shaft into the differential, which splits the power output onto the wheels, and then the wheels start rotating. And this is basically how all cars move. The horsepower of the car is dependent on many factors. One of them is how much fuel it can combust in a certain amount of time. To combust high amounts of fuel, you need oxygen. And this is the point where forced induction comes in. And if you want to know more about forced induction, I have a video on turbos and superchargers. In most engines, it comes from a turbocharger which forces more air into the engine. The other one is how high it can rev, which is also dependent on some factors. For example, diesels can't rev very high, and that's why it's harder to make a lot of horsepower on them. Because the internals need to be heavy because of the point I talked about above, which is it has high compression. And that's why it needs heavy internals, which would create too much forces and inertia that it would just break itself. The next one is also torque. And here's diesel has the advantage because of the high compression. More forces are being transferred on the crankshaft, and thus more torque is being created and transferred to the wheels. And to calculate horsepower itself, there is a specific equation which is that you need to take the torque that an engine produces, multiply it by the RPM, and that subtract with 5,252. As an example, we can take the Lamborghini V12 in the Aventador, which produces 510 pound-feet of torque, and multiply it by 8,400. Then subtract that with 5,252, which is around 815 horsepower. And if you account for the losses through the transmission and heat, then you get to around the 700 horsepower the Aventador really produces. And with that, you basically learned everything you need to know about car engines. And if you want more of it like these, check out the video about transmission, and please leave a like and comment if you still have questions about car engine that we didn't answer today. And see you in the next one. Bye.